Hello and welcome to the Women in Motorsports program. Joe Samieger here, along with Ben Schneider. Encourage everyone in the chat room to be sure to comment. Of course, we will be reading them and respond to them, but since this is taped, we won't be able to answer them on the air, but we definitely like to get in touch with everyone. Big thank you to everyone commenting in all our videos. It helps us spread the word, and if you really want to help the Grid Network, invest in us through Patreon. Colin, Michelle, Mark, Robin, David, and our newest member, Matthew. They all invest in the Grid Network each and every month, helping us pay the bills, go to the tracks. We'll love to have more people supporting us. If you enjoy what we did at Portland for Formula E, IndyCar, and NASCAR, we'll love to do more of that at more venues, send more of our team across the country, and potentially internationally. Now, Ben, we'll start right here in the United States. Over at Bristol, where we know the ARCA race just wrapping up. We'll get into that shortly, but Toni Breidinger, she's been overall having a pretty good run as of late. Sous Chef Fast Track 150 at Kansas. Toni started 12th, then she finished third place. Overall, she's been looking really good, Ben, I have to say, ever since the last few races. Last 6 races, not counting Bristol, 6 top 10s, 3 top 5 finishes. I felt like in the first half of the year, last year, we were all concerned about her performance, her pace compared to her other teammates. Now it's starting to look better. And overall, we know Bristol just wrapping up. Toni Breidinger, a little bit of bad luck, but 12th place finish. And she even came back from a couple laps down to 1 lap down. So overall, is this the kind of improvement we need from Toni Breidinger to have her in the discussion and conversation for potential Truck Series opportunities?
Absolutely. And I think I said on this show, Joe, when her first truck opportunity was announced, I thought maybe this is a little bit premature, but she is showing the kind of improvement that I think justifies more opportunities. And even her runs in the Truck Series that she's gotten, the 3 starts she's done this year, I think she's absolutely earned more truck starts in 2024. We'll see exactly what her schedule is going to look like going forward in due time, whenever those contracts get situated and everything. But you look at her recent ARCA starts, I mean, there's absolutely, a massive improvement there, and that's been great to see. Now, again, I know some people have, kind of taken it and run with it and said, she's got a massive following on social media. She's certainly very marketable. She's brought in some new sponsors like Victoria's Secret, Raising Cane's. These are big name brands that are, on her truck and ARCA car respectively now, and that's great to see. I think we should hold off on, talking about Xfinity or even Cup opportunities. I think there was a tweet from Adam Stern that talked about how, if Toni Breidinger went to the Cup Series right now, she'd immediately be one of the most marketable. I think that may be true based on social media, but based on where she is in her career on the track, I think we're still at least a few years away from having those conversations. I think right now, based on her ARCA results and based on the limited run she's had in the Truck Series, the improvement that she has shown, I think certainly another full-time year of ARCA would be a great opportunity for her. I know she's done some GR Cup stuff this year with Toyota. That's why she hasn't been full-time in the ARCA Series. But, if there's a full-time truck opportunity waiting for her as well, I think that could be a great avenue for her to continue in her development and keep taking those steps forward and making that progress in her NASCAR career here.
As you mentioned, Toni has done some Truck Series starts, 3 starts, the 2 top 20 finishes, and that also includes 1 start at Gateway, where she finished 24th, 1 lap down, where she was a last-minute substitute. Of course, we were in Portland. She got the call to go to Gateway, race there. Also, we got to talk about, from Kansas, Mandy Chick. This is her home track race. She was very excited. I know earlier in the year, you got to talk to her. 9th place finish at Kansas. This is her 4th start of 2023 and has 1 top 10 and 1 top 5 finish at Daytona at the beginning of the season. Now, Ben, we've seen Mandy Chick essentially finish top 12 in 3 of her 4 starts. I know Daytona, we talked about her big goal, just finish the laps. Getting that top 5 finish was a huge accomplishment. Could we potentially see Mandy in the running for a full-time seat in ARCA, whether it is ARCA Main Series or the East Series?
Joe, I don't know. I know she would love to have that opportunity if she can find the funding and find the opportunity for that to become a reality for her. But I just think back to when we interviewed her for this show after her 5th place run at Daytona, and she mentioned her schedule was looking closer to 10 to 12 ARCA races this year. That was the goal. As you mentioned, this is only her fourth start of the season. We haven't seen her in the ARCA Menard Series since they were last at Kansas earlier this spring. So, I know she's, doing some academic work as well. I don't know if that, took priority for her this summer and she couldn't get out to the track like she was hoping, or what, happened there with her schedule. Obviously, she hasn't run as many races as I think she would have liked or she was expecting going into this year. But if they can find the funding and find those opportunities for her to get her out on track, I'm sure she would be very open to a full-time opportunity. I think based on the limited runs that she's had, not just this year, but last year as well, when she made those couple of starts, I think that would be a very deserved opportunity for her to continue to build on that great run. In particular, Joe, that you were mentioning that she had at Daytona, that top 5 finish was absolutely fantastic.
Fantastic. And one of her worst finishes, Talladega, but we know Talladega, you're just sort of a passenger when it comes to super speedway racing. So a lot of potential. Will be really interesting to see what happens with Mandy 2024. Going back to Toni Breidinger, we have essentially 2 races left. Bristol is now in the books. We got Salem and Toledo, 2 more short tracks. Toni in Bristol, 12th place finish, 1 lap down. We know Bristol is a much different beast compared to the other short tracks with the banking, all the chaos that occurs with that compared to in a short track where you have a little less banking, a little bit more slower pace. So overall, when you compare the other tracks coming up and Bristol, what kind of expectations do you anticipate if we see Toni Breidinger making those starts?
Yeah, well, that's just it. We don't know for sure because her schedule is part-time this year. And, the Venturini cars have mostly been a rotation as to who's in that car every week. So we'll see if we see Toni back out here for these last couple of races this season. But, I think at where she is at this point, her most recent run of success that she's had, the steps forward that she's taken, I think at this point, top 10 shouldn't just be a reasonable expectation. It should be, something that, if she's not in the top 10, then, it would probably a disappointment at this point. You look at the results that she's had, she's certainly taken those steps forward. I think a top 10 is like you said, the expectation at the minimum. She probably should be competing for, if not in the top 5, very close to the top 5 with where she's at this point. Obviously you look at Bristol, and I've said this in a group chat that I'm in as we were watching this race, just a couple of hours ago. Obviously, if you're watching this now, it's, Friday morning, but we're taping it just after the Bristol race wrapped up. I have mixed feelings about ARCA even being at Bristol, just because it's such a challenging track and there's such a speed differential between the Venturinis and the Joe Gibbs cars of the world, and then your back markers and kind of start and park or lower funded entries that are out there on track. I mean, there's just no comparison in the speed there. I think it gets kind of dangerous at times, and you see cars really get held up by the lap traffic when the speed differential is that great. But I think, for Breidinger to get caught up in the one instant that she did, to get a couple of lucky dogs, get back to only 1 lap down, bring the car home, generally speaking, in one piece, as much as you can at Bristol in the ARCA Menard Series, I think it was a solid night for her. Just to be able to recover from that and bring the car home, I think, she can take some positive momentum from that for whatever the remainder of her 23 schedule looks like.
And you mentioned with Bristol, we had over 30 cars starting this, a very large field for ARCA. So 12th place finish, overcome some of the challenges, huge accomplishment for her and that team. But I would have to agree with you. With the improvement we're seeing, if you're outside the top 10, it has to be disappointing. I think with Bristol, with what they overcame, they could take some pride in knowing, hey, we had this thrown at us. We overcame. We got to the 12th place finish. We came to being so close, being back on the lead lap. But at the end, I think the rest of the season, top 10 finishes has to be the expectation for Toni if we see her in the next 2 races. Now, Bristol, we also saw a couple of other faces. Rita Goulet and Amber Slagle, they were at the track, but neither of them were behind the vehicle racing at the track. What were their situations at Bristol?
So Rita Goulet was on the entry list, and ARCA Timing and Scoring actually still indicates that she was in the car. It was actually her husband, Tim, and the FS1 broadcast confirmed this. The car actually wouldn't fire, if it did fire, wouldn't go very far at the start of the race. They had to take it behind the wall for some repairs. But it was actually Rita's husband, Tim, that was in the car. He brought it out in the middle of the race and then was in an accident that took that entry out. But Rita and Tim's team was here at Bristol this Thursday night here. So she was at the track, as was Amber Slagle, not as a driver, but as a crew chief for Caden Honeycutt. So, Great to see, even if it's not behind the wheel, still a lot of women involved in the ARCA Menard series, and Jamie Little highlighting that on the broadcast as well. Again, you don't have to go that far back to a time where women weren't even allowed access into pit road, and now we don't only see them behind the wheel, we see them working in many different areas at the track, including Jamie herself up in the broadcast booth. So it's great to see.
Very great to see more females in motorsports, not just in driving, but on pit road. We know there's some on the pit crews as well, but sitting on top of that crew chief box, that always has to be something very special, and definitely hopeful to see more of that. Now, 2024, Ben, we're hopeful to see more of Jamie Chadwick in Indy next.
That's right, Joe. Three-time and I guess only W Series champion, completed her first year in Indy next here in 2023. 14 rounds, 5 top 10s. Her best finish was when you were out there at Portland, Joe, with a 6th-place run. It was a 12th place finish in the standings with 262 points total. 25 drivers in all made at least one start this year and scored points. Christian Rasmussen won the title with 539 points. But when you look at the drivers that ran full time, Jamie Chadwick was 10th of those 10 drivers. So with all that in mind, Joe, how would you rate her first season here in Indy next?
Overall, if I had to rate her season, I'll give it between a 6 and a 7. There's a lot of pressure, I think, on Jamie Chadwick because she is the only W Series champion. We know there's a huge difference in the cars she's used to, those tattoos cars versus the Indy next car. When we talked to Linus Lundqvist a couple of years ago and talked about Jamie Chadwick, what's the biggest challenge going from those tattoos cars to the Indy next cars, he explained it's almost like a reverse driving. Rather than trying to be smooth and steady, you got to be aggressive because these cars are tricky to handle. So we knew Jamie Chadwick had that learning curve, but also we know there's several other drivers that had that learning curve, and I think those drivers show they could get a little bit on pace a little bit faster. Jamie Chadwick, great effort on her this year. I think, overall, this is a season where she has to be proud, I think, of what she had done this year with the steps. Could she have done a bit more? Oh, yes, definitely. But we didn't see her just struggling at every track. I think overall she did a pretty fair job. And the big thing, when we talked to her in Portland, she was enjoying her time here. She was having fun, getting to interact with the drivers, the fans, the paddock, how it's a much more open environment compared to what she's used to, and just racing in the United States, including, we talked to her right after she'd done an oval race, a night race. She seems to be overall pretty excited about potentially coming back in 2024.
I think next season's going to be, assuming she does have the opportunity to come back, that's when you want to see those results take a step forward and certainly improve there, particularly on the ovals. And I know there's only a couple on the Indy next schedule. I will continue to fight for saving the Freedom 100. I think it's an absolute crime that race is not back yet on the Indy next schedule. But, I think for all the young drivers, not just Jamie Chadwick, but any young drivers trying to work their way up the road to Indy ladder, I know we have this problem in the main IndyCar series too, but how are we going to teach these drivers how to race at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway on a 2.5-mile oval if we don't have hardly any ovals in Indy next or in some of the lower series on the road to Indy? So that's not just something that I think Jamie Chadwick could benefit from. I think everybody in the series could benefit from having a couple more ovals in Indy next. So we'll see if that comes to fruition next year as well. I certainly would love to see that. But let's get back to Jamie Chadwick here now, Joe. You had an opportunity to talk with her in Portland. As you mentioned, she expressed the enjoyment of racing here in the United States and wanting to come back. However, the news of her return has kind of been thrown up in the air with the recent news that the DHL sponsorship that has been a long partner of Andretti Autosport, they just confirmed that will be ending, or I guess has ended, with the IndyCar season wrapping up here at the end of 2023. They've been with Andretti since 2011. However, they haven't been in victory lane since 2018 in the finale at Sonoma when Ryan Hunter-Reay was in that car. He was in the car until 2021. Then Roman Grosjean came in 22, and DHL expanded to include Chadwick's Indy Next program this year in 23. So, Joe, with that in mind, does DHL's departure from Andretti jeopardize Chadwick's return? And were you surprised by the news that we got this past week that DHL will not be returning to the team?
This definitely does jeopardize Jamie Chadwick's potential return in Indy next for 2024. We know sponsorship is a big thing when it comes to landing a ride, no matter the series, whether it's a Road to Indy series, IndyCar itself, Other forms of motorsports, sponsorship money does the talking now. Jamie Chadwick, I think, similar to how you mentioned about Toni Breidinger, could be very marketable. Jamie Chadwick being W Series champion, big following, I think she could be very marketable to sponsorships. With that said, though, I was, to be honest, not surprised to see DHL leave. DHL, their long tenure with Andretti Autosport, started off great, but then to think that after Ryan Hunter race last win, only 3 podium finishes. With Roman Grosjean coming into that car, the 28 DHL car, we weren't coming in thinking this is a guy that needs more time, maybe get some podiums. This is a driver we anticipate to go out there, get podiums, get wins, contend for a championship. Didn't work out that first season. Okay, maybe it was just a little bit too much of a change the second year. And I think at this point, this is probably when DHL was starting to wonder, look, we've been with Andretti this long. Our longtime driver, Ryan Hunter-Reay, is gone. You brought in a former F1 driver who did really good at Dale Coyne Racing. Why are we not seeing the results? It looked promising at the very beginning of the season, but then it went downhill, and we know the mess that season was between Grosjean and Andretti Autosport. And I think, unfortunately, with that mess we were seeing there, Jamie Chadwick doing, I would say, about average, maybe a little above average when it came to Indy Next. I think DHL decided, you know what, we're going to look for new opportunities. And of course, other teams are going to try to lure us, look what we could do in IndyCar. Because at the end of the day, for DHL, this was a business decision. You can't go this long with a great sponsor like DHL, which also has a presence internationally in F1, and expect them to stick around when you're not bringing them podiums consistently. You're not bringing them wins, and they're not seeing their driver contending for a championship because they want to see the DHL uniform up there on the podium and the newspaper everywhere. They weren't getting that, and I just think it's unfortunate that the timing of DHL's partnership ending with Andretti. Jamie Chadwick, I do believe she could potentially find some new sponsorship to return back, but now that luxury of having DHL right there doesn't appear to be the case anymore.
Well, it is certainly a major void that Andretti's going to have to fill next year with DHL leaving, and we will, of course, keep you all updated on what that means for Jamie Chadwick, the only female driver in Indy Next this past season, and what that means for her career here in the United States as she pursues a career in the American Open Wheel Racing ladder. You can follow along for any updates right here on the Grid Network. In the meantime, Joe, let's shift over back to NASCAR and give an update on Hailie Deegan and how her NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series season's gone.
Yeah, Hailie Deegan, the only female driver in the NASCAR Truck Series, racing full-time again this year. And overall, this has been, I would say, a rough season been for Hailie Deegan. 1 top 10 finish at Texas, 6th place. She's not in the playoffs. We talked about earlier in the year, she should be in the playoffs. Now, we know Motorsport, they did switch over to Ford. So we were thinking, well, maybe it's a little bit that, but we've seen her teammates. They've gotten wins, including Joey Logano at Bristol Dirt, just in a truck for 1 race. This is her 3rd season in the Truck Series, and we know the season's coming toward an end. So do you think potentially the patience from Fords and sponsors on seeing Deegan perform might be starting to draw thin?
Yeah, I think so. And again, Deegan is certainly very marketable with what she does with her social media pages, and I'm sure that brings some added exposure to her partners as well. But again, it doesn't justify not making the playoffs in a ThorSport truck, not really even coming close, to be quite honest with you, to making the playoffs in a ThorSport truck. When you have teammates that are winning races and teammates that are competing for championships, when ThorSport, and I don't think it's an exaggeration to say this, the main reason that they switched to Ford was so that they could bring Deegan in because of her relationship with the manufacturer, and you only have 1 top 10 finish driving that 13 truck, that is a problem. That is the worst. She is on pace, I should say, for the worst full-time season in that 13 truck for ThorSport since Shelby Howard in 2008. It's been a decade and a half since the 13 was struggling for results in the same way it has been this year. And again, like I've been saying on the show for a long time now, at some point, Hailie Deegan needs to show that she's capable of running in or around the top 10 at least as often as not. And to only have 1 top 10 through whatever it is now, 19, 20 Truck Series races this season, it's simply not good. And the stats there's really no defense for it. I know that might sound pretty harsh, but it's her third year in trucks, like you mentioned, Joe. She's not a rookie anymore. She's not, with the exception of Milwaukee, I guess, going to these tracks for the first time for the most part. She's got experience now. You would have expected by now to have seen a step forward in the results. And to be honest, we haven't really seen that from what she was doing in the DGR Crossley truck the last couple of years.
Yeah, this season has just not been going good for her at all. As you mentioned, just seems like even worse than before. We've seen her have success when it came to the K&N series, but overall, this has just been one of the worst seasons. Unfortunately for her, 4 races remaining. We know they're just about to start at Bristol, so it'll be interesting to see how she does in Bristol tonight. Talladega, that's a wild card. I mean, if your truck can start up, you got a shot at winning. Avoid the big one. That's a big key, but we know there's a playoffs, so a playoff driver might likely be up front. Homestead, all the different grooves there, and then, of course, Phoenix. Those are the only races left for Hailie Deegan and all the Truck Series drivers. So if she was to score top 10 finishes, would that be a good indicator to keep Deegan in the discussion for another year in the Truck Series? Or even, we know she did an Xfinity start, potentially make a move to Xfinity Series?
Yeah, Joe, the future for Hailie Deegan is going to be very interesting. We'll see what she ends up doing this offseason. I know a lot of people have suggested that Xfinity Series move because they say, well, when you look at the Truck Series, it's kind of a chaotic mess and these drivers don't have a lot of experience and you frequently get caught up in somebody else's mess. But the counter to that is you're much more likely to get caught up in somebody else's mess if you're running down in the 20s and not up in the top 10s. So that's, kind of, I think, been the story of Deegan's season in many respects. Now, not every accident she's been in has been of her own doing, but at the same time, when you're racing around other inexperienced drivers towards the back of the pack that are more prone to make mistakes, you're much more likely to get caught up in that kind of stuff. You talk about Talladega, Joe, that was where she got a 6th place finish last year, and obviously we all know how super speedway racing works. If, like you said, if your car or truck will start up and you have a reasonable understanding of how the draft works, or sometimes you don't even need that. You just need a lightning strike at the right time, and then Justin Haley can take a Spire Motorsports car to victory lane at Daytona like he did 4 years ago. So, that could be an opportunity for her. I don't know that, even if she goes out and wins that race, that that's necessarily indicative of her overall season performance. It would certainly be a massive confidence boost and morale boost and shot in the arm for whatever she does next year. But I will say this about Deegan and the potential move to the Xfinity Series, because she did have a solid run in the one start that she made last year. If she goes to Xfinity, you would have to think that it's, if not going to be in a Stewart-Haas car itself, certainly a car that is heavily aligned with Stewart-Haas, maybe an RSS racing car that gets a lot of support from Stewart-Haas, or, obviously she did a race for SS Greenlight Racing in 2022. It would be a situation like that where it's not a Stewart-Haas racing car on paper per the owner's standings sheet, but we all know that they're getting a lot of technical support from that team. That's probably what the situation would be. There would not be the equipment excuse. In other words, she's not getting the best equipment or whatever. Ford would certainly maximize that opportunity. And she would have to go out and at least run as well as she did at Vegas in her one start, and give her credit for that. She did have a very strong debut, but would that be sustainable over the course of a full season? How would she perform over a full season? If the answer is similar to what she's been doing in trucks, then unfortunately, I think, at some point, you've got to take that step forward. And if she cannot do that next year, I think it may be the end of the road for Hailie Deegan in NASCAR, at least. I know she has an off-road background as well. I know that her family is very involved in multiple different disciplines of motorsports. I'm sure there's a motorsports future for her. But if she's unable to, at some point, make that progress and move up the ladder and justify moving up the ladder, I don't know that that future is going to be in stock car racing long term.
That's the key. You got to move up. You got to perform. Driver could be very marketable, but at the end of the day, it's the results and the finishes that count. For Hailie Deegan, time is running out. We encourage everyone to comment with your thoughts on all the races we talked about. And of course, definitely subscribe to the Grid Network if you haven't done so yet. Be sure to follow us on social media. Hit the bell icon when you subscribe so you don't miss any of our programs. We're going to have Grid Life pre-race tomorrow, as well as the wrap-up show, the encore show, and Grid Tonight. And definitely we're planning to be back on the air again to talk more about some of the female racers on NHRA. And, of course, F1 Academy. They'll be coming to COTA. Definitely we're planning on previewing that event and the point stands, the points battle coming up. For Ben Schneider, I'm Joe Samaniego. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time. Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.